Is it time for parliamentary elections in Scotland, do you think? Is that the way this has to go now?
I think so. And it just looks like for Humza Yousaf now that it's a matter of when, not if, doesn't it? And I think that him going in and of itself won't deliver the change that Scottish people need. It's time to put the question back to the people of Scotland, let them decide what they think should happen. We've had chaos since all the stories emerged around Nicola Sturgeon. And really, I think the public are fed up with political chaos across the UK as well as in Scotland. I mean, we've got new figures out today showing 1.1 businesses are saying 1.1 million, businesses, that's 1 in 5 overall, say that economic uncertainty is the number one factor impacting their turnover. Well, political uncertainty causes economic uncertainty. And I think we need to get back to a point where we're serving the people of Scotland, not just going from crisis to crisis, as seems to be the case at the moment.
I wanted to ask you about Labour's plans to remove the VAT exemption on independent school fees, because there's warnings in the papers today from government sources that state schools would simply not be prepared for an influx in students. And we've got another story that we've been covering this morning about a teacher shortage crisis, that teaching assistants are routinely having to cover lessons in England and Wales because there simply are not enough teaching staff. I mean, these government sources would say that these Labour plans are detrimental to children's education.
I'd say this government is detrimental to children's education. The failures that we have seen, the growing gap in terms of attainment is really worrying in our schools. And of course, our teachers are overstretched. I've got 3 kids in state schools, and I see the impact, as I think all parents do, of the shortage of teachers and the need we have to encourage more people to go into the teaching profession. Now, on the private school policy, the Institute for Fiscal Studies looked at this. They said that they thought we would raise over £1 billion from this policy. I think it's right that where resources are there, we put them into our schools across the board, which is the majority state schools, to try and bring standards up so that we get to a point where people say, well, I don't need to send my child to a private school because actually the local school is brilliant. That's where Labour want to get to.
Yes, but that doesn't get rid of the problem, does it? That if you suddenly slap VAT on the fee for private schools, 20%, and then you are going to end up with, or at least it's claimed, a whole lot of people immediately pulling their children out and putting them into state schools that aren't prepared for that influx. I mean, it's an immediate... I know you've got long-term goals there, which is great, but what do you do about the immediate problem?
Well, that is not an immediate problem that has been identified by anybody in terms of any evidence. That's just the government putting that forward. The Institute for Fiscal Studies think we will make money from this, which is based on people remaining in the private sector. If you look at private education, how much the fees have increased over recent years, they've increased well above inflation in most cases. So we have seen increases, and that hasn't seen a reduction in people using them. So the evidence, I think, is just not there that this is going to happen. Now, we want all our schools to be great. We want people to have choice, but we want all our schools to be great. And where there is a loophole in the tax system, as there is currently when it comes to VAT in private schools, we think we should put that right. That's only fair. In terms of your key point on businesses and economic uncertainty, look, the whole Western world, if you want to put it in those terms, has been suffering with economic uncertainty at the moment. I mean, it's partly in the wake of COVID and all the rest of it. You can't pin that entirely on the government, so that there may be 1.1 million businesses very worried because of economic uncertainty. It doesn't mean that a change of government is going to immediately bring that under control. I think you make a fair point, of course, that you can't look at the economy and rule out the impact of all kinds of global shocks like the war in Ukraine. Of course, that's true. But if you look at the chaos we had under Boris Johnson, with 70 of his ministers resigning and him having to be forced out. If you look at the mini budget with Liz Truss that crashed the economy, if you look at where we are compared to other countries, the first parliament in history, this parliament, to see a fall in living standards, and we've got the lowest business investment in the G7. These are decisions that have consequences that the government is making. Rishi Sunak told us this week that we turned a corner, but of course prices are still rising and we're still in recession. And when he changes his ministers every 5 minutes, is embroiled in internal battles the whole time. We've had ministers out this morning in the papers saying that backbenchers shouldn't revolt against Rishi. When you have that level of chaos in central government, of course it has an impact on businesses. And we talk to businesses all the time. In my role, it's my job to do. And what they say is, please, if you do nothing else, give us some stability, give us a plan, some certainty, get a grip on the national spending so that we know where we can invest, when we can invest, and we can take those managed risks so that we can grow our businesses and grow the economy.
It's interesting talking to Labour politicians like yourself, because obviously this is an election year. You're all acting with a degree of confidence because you feel like you are a government in waiting, and we will have to, see what the polls say. But you all have that degree of confidence. And look, when you look at the polls, it's understandable. But how comfortable do you feel then, with all that in mind? David Lammy, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, has been holding meetings with, this is according to the Telegraph, holding meetings with a series of Trump world figures over recent months, waiting to see if Donald Trump should get back into the White House in November. Is that a sensible thing to do, or does that make you feel uncomfortable?
No, I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. Look, the reality is the American people will decide who their president is. And it'll either be Biden or Trump. And they are, the Americans, our closest allies. We must keep that relationship, and we must build on it and try and make sure, whether it comes to the global situation, the war in Ukraine, the uncertainty in the Middle East, we're working hand in hand. And in terms of our trade and our economy, it's really important that whoever is in the White House has a good relationship with us. And you're right, the Labour Party is having those conversations, as you would expect. But we don't take anything for granted in terms of the election. It's going to be a difficult fight, and we wouldn't assume anything, but it's only right that we would be preparing to have a strong relationship with whoever is in the White House after the election.
OK. Sarah Jones, really good to talk to you this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.